There's so much research out there, evidence of different ways you can be living your life at midlife. So we wanted to turn that midlife crisis on its head and show people it as a midlife opportunity or a midlife transformation.
What is a midlife crisis?
It's really interesting. The first use of the phrase we can find was a psychoanalyst who was actually in the 60s. But the interesting thing about it is he later on went to admit that at that particular point in his life, he was feeling like rather depressed as well. So I think he described it as the realization that his life's achievements were complete and he was staring down the road towards his inevitable mortality.
Hi, James. How are you?
Pretty good, Mark. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I have been looking forward to our conversation because your company, Midlife Mentors, you guys are doing some special things out there.
Oh, thank you for saying that. It really came about because we were in the wellness space running retreats. A lot of our clients were heading towards midlife or in midlife, and we're seeing lots of similar things presenting. But more than that, we're seeing like our friends that are our age going, oh, this is just the beginning of the end. We've got to put up with expanding waistlines, low energy. We're like, no, look, it doesn't have to be this way. There's so much research out there, evidence of different ways you can be living your life at midlife. So we wanted to turn that midlife crisis on its head and show people it as a midlife opportunity or a midlife transformation. My wife and I, we work in it together. We pulled our knowledge, started a podcast off the back of that, started to run a group coaching program. And we came to it with like really offering an integrated approach to midlife. So it's understanding what's going on for you hormonally, how that's going to affect you physiologically, but also psychologically. What psychological pressures are coming to bear at this time of life? What's the best way to be exercising? How should you be nourishing your body? And you put all that together, you have a complete set for people to rediscover their passions and redefine what they want their midlife to be and not see it as the beginning of the end, but as the start of something new.
Yeah. No, it's so important because midlife crisis is just a phrase that gets thrown around so much. And I don't think there's anybody out there who hasn't heard the phrase before. But I don't think many people understand what that truly means. And I have friends or I'll meet with people in gatherings and they'll refer to themselves and say, maybe I'm having a midlife crisis. I don't really know. What is a midlife crisis?
It's really interesting. The first use of the phrase we can find was a psychoanalyst who was actually in the 60s. I think he delivered a talk first and then wrote a paper on it. And he coined the term midlife crisis. But the interesting thing about it is he later on went to admit that at that particular point in his life, he was feeling like rather depressed as well. So I think he described it as the realization that his life's achievements were complete and he was staring down the road towards his inevitable mortality. But having the chance to revisit it when he was older, and this maps with newer research where we've got the happiness curve. Peak unhappiness for people tends to fall in like our mid 40s, but then we actually start to become happier again as we go out and we start to age. So the midlife crisis then took on this sad stereotypical thing that was something that mainly affected men. And it was like the 40, 50-year-old guy would suddenly start dressing with his shirts undone, big medallions, open top sports car, 20-year-old model next to him. And I got this really sad stereotype about it. And I think that doesn't exist so much today, but people still, I think, do see it as a time of crisis potentially because it's a natural where I think we assess where we are in our lives. Have we got the things we thought we would have? Have we achieved what we wanted to? And whether we have or not, then the question is, but actually, has that made me happy? What am I living to my values? What's my purpose? Looking ahead, do I want my life to continue this way? Certainly when a lot of clients we work with are outwardly very successful, but they're like, but that's not lighting me up. And it's not what I want to be going, not what I want to be doing down the track. So it's about this point in life where we can recognize that we've achieved a lot. We've probably raised children. We might have newfound freedom from those children leaving home and going off to college or getting jobs. But we might have given away so much of our identity into that, into our relationship, into running our career, being a parent. Who are we now? And more importantly, who do we want to be going forward? What's the next step for us?
Wow, what you just said, we have given up so much of our identity in being there for others and serving others that there comes a point where we start realizing who are we and more importantly, where we go. Profound. Yeah. How did you come into all of this?
By a very roundabout route. My background originally was psychology. I studied psychology, then I did a master's in psychology. So I was fascinated by human behavior. And I even worked as a psychologist for a while before abandoning that to become a writer in the magazines, then got involved in the digital side of this new thing called the internet that was appearing back in those days, into the corporate world, like business development for media companies. So I worked for News International, which was the Times, MTV, doing like multi-territory deals around digital content. But I enjoyed it. I loved it. but I felt there was something more. And I'd always picked up my fitness, my health. So I took the decision in 2011 to move to an island in Spain called Ibiza and start running retreats. And I wanted to turn the model that existed then on its head. So back in those days, retreats were very focused on weight loss. And it was like, we'll get you away. We're just going to feast you hard all day, every day, and then just feed you like minimal calories and you lose weight. And I was like, it's not really enjoyable. You're not learning anything. The weight just comes back on when you leave. So I'm like, let's partner with 5-star resorts. Let's have a healthy menu. But also, if you want to go and have a burger and fries, have a burger and fries, because we'll give you nutritional coaching. You'll understand what's going into body. We'll give you the mindset coaching around it. Like, why do you keep failing at trying to lose weight? What are the beliefs that are there? What's the fear behind it? So launched that in 2012 over there, ran retreats in Ibiza and Marbella very successfully until COVID. And Claire and I had started the Midlife Mentors as a podcast, but then obviously COVID took away the retreats business. So we really then pivoted hard into the online space, running the group coaching programs, one-to-one coaching, and starting to work with corporates as well, going into them to talk about issues around midlife. I'm a menopause practitioner as well. So I get to go into organizations and talk about the menopause to female audiences, but also get to go in and talk to male audiences. So I go into like heavily male dominated environments, power stations, oil refineries, and talk to the guys about menopause. They can understand what their partners could be going through and talk to them about what can be going on for them as well, and help them have an understanding of what's going on for both partners in relationships. They can maybe rebuild the bridges there and have a better, more deeper relationship.
Wow. So obviously COVID forced you to pivot into direction. Luckily, you already had the interest and the expertise to be able to run this type of business. What was it like to be able to take a hard turn though? Because a lot of people here, entrepreneurs who are listening to this, and sometimes life forces us to be able to make decisions in our business that we are not really willing to. What was that like going through that process?
It was scary, and I think it always is. My reflection on business is when you have a free choice, it's actually scarier than when it's forced upon you, I think personally, because if you're thinking about a pivot, but everything else is running okay, it's like, oh, but what's potential downside? What am I going to do? Whereas with COVID, the situation was very clear. We couldn't run retreats. So it's okay, we sit and we wait and we do nothing, or we get creative and think about what we can do. And we'd already been talking for a long time about moving into providing coaching in an online capacity, because retreats business is great, but it's very time intensive, very exhaustive, very rewarding, but very exhaustive. So it kicked us to move to this place, but doing it was scary, right? You're like, okay, I'm moving to a totally new field. I've got to learn some of the skills, some of the marketing skills and things that overlap, but other things we had to learn from scratch really quickly. So I think for any entrepreneur listening, a pivot is always scary. I'd say do your research, but have the courage of your convictions and just be prepared to do the hard work, and don't expect success to come straight away. I think in modern society, there's so much noise out there on the internet, right? Particularly social media. There's all these coaches that are like, yeah, man, if you're not doing 10K a month straight away off the bat, you're failing. No, listen, just find your way that works for you. Don't get distracted by the noise and stick at it. And success will come if you've got a good concept and you're disciplined and you're consistent in executing on it. It's very easy to get distracted by the noise, the shiny new object syndrome. Oh, if I learn this method, that will work. If I learn this method. But you know what? Just give it time before you make another drastic pivot, I'd say.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the details of the process, the steps that you took to come up with the idea and the decision that this is the business you were going to go through? Because many beginning entrepreneurs, they are confused about, what do? I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. You didn't have that problem. You already had a very successful business, money in the back and experience, but you had a different type of problem. Having run a successful business, you already knew what works and what doesn't work. And in the realm of what works, essentially you could be thinking, I could do this and I could do this and I could do this, right? So when you're talking about doing the research and the due diligence and the discipline, looking back at it, it sounds so romantic. But I'm sure in the moment it was stressful, anxiety driven, because this COVID thing was happening and nobody knew how long it was going to last. So what were the steps? If you had to coach somebody through this process again, how did you go about it?
Yeah, I'd say the most important thing is to test your concept, right? And I see a lot of people going wrong here. People have an idea and they're like, I'm going to build the whole thing first and then market it and see if I can get customers. What we did was like, you know what, we think there's a market for this based on years of running retreats and having these conversations with people and similar issues presenting. We know that we've got potential solutions for it. let's figure out how we can package that together. And then let's run a beta. So we'll go out to people we know and go, hey, look, this is an idea for a program I'm running. Do you want to come on the beta and see how that goes? And luckily for us, it went really well. But of course, there's always feedback. People are like, this was great, would have liked this, would have liked that. And then you can refine, I think, by actually using real life customers, refine what you're offering and tweak and adjust. Then once you have your product or service out there, it's really important to be mindful of two things, I think. Are you keeping abreast of what's happening in the market is one, without being distracted by, again, chasing new shiny object. But two, continue listening to the feedback from your customers to always seek to improve it. So I'd say that's the key thing. Always think from the client perspective of what their experience is, what their results are, and what their experience is in getting to those results.
It's so obvious just the way you are and the way you're explaining things. You have such structured critical thinking, and you're able to break down steps and then I'll be able to execute that in a disciplined manner, right? How did you develop that? Is that something how you were all your life, or something happened through your career or transitions that you became that way?
I'd say, listen, I'd say discipline. I say this to all my clients, anyone listen, like discipline is a superpower. And if you can get discipline in one area of your life, it will then start to spill out into other areas of your life. And I think I was fortunate that from a very young age, I was put in a very disciplined environment via school. And then there was a lot around sport and health in particular. So the discipline of keeping fit, going to the gym, that was always there. I think I've been fortunate in my career that I've been exposed to a lot of good mentors, worked in a lot of different environments. So you pick up different learnings. So when I was on my own, like, listen, when I first went on my own, I made a load of mistakes, right? Because suddenly you don't have the corporate beast behind you. You don't have departments you can get to do stuff. There's no one to go and ask, oh, I'll go and ask accounts about that. No, you are accounts, your sales, your accounts, your marketing. And it was tough. I dropped the ball on a lot of things. But I think once you get past that hurdle, it's about applying discipline, thinking, keeping your eye on the goal. Where do I want to go? And work back. What are the steps to get there? And what am I going to execute on today to move to that next step? Always keep an eye on the goal, but don't get too concerned with that goal if it's far in the future. Just focus on the next 2 steps ahead, I'd say, and that will get you there.
No, it's priceless advice. Being able to stay focused on task and not being able to be swept away with all the possibilities of things that could or couldn't happen is honestly what makes the difference between a champion and somebody who's not. And for somebody who's like yourself, who has built more than one successful company, hearing it from your mouth, it brings so much more value and depth to the concept. When you're working with your clientele now, what is one of the biggest challenges that you feel that is in their way to become the best version of themselves? Because logically speaking, tactically speaking, we all know what we need to do. When I was overweight, I knew I needed to go to gym and eat better. Somebody had a crappy job, they know they need to look for a different job. If you're stuck in a bad relationship, you know what you need to do. Where does, especially with the psychology background of yours, ability to tactically complete the tasks due to discipline, but then the psychological reason why we don't do it, how do you manage that with your clients?
Like you say, it's easy, right? We all know what we should be doing, but for some reason, the execution of what we should be doing is the hard bit. And I think it's with clients, I'm like, okay, but why is that? What's the reason that's hard? What is the belief behind that? So when we dig into it, there'll always be a belief holding you back, right? So our subconscious is an amazing thing. It allows us to do so much. It runs everything on autopilot. We're exposed to so much stimulus every second of every day that our brains can't process it. So they fill in the gaps, and our beliefs help us do that. But the thing is, we form these beliefs very early, usually. And while they might have been good at protecting us as a child, they're not always appropriate for us as adults. But we've kept them and they can hold us back. So it's about having the courage to look at, really dig in and go, okay, why am I failing at that? Why is that so hard for me? What's the belief? And it's often not the belief, but the fear behind that. What's the fear? Is it fear I'm going to lose something? Is it a fear that I'm going to push something away from me? Self-sabotage is a classic one. It's because the subconscious will always try and keep us safe. But the safe for the subconscious means basically alive and functioning, which is why you get people staying in really horrific situations, abusive relationships, because their subconscious is, oh, if you leave, if you change things, that could be dangerous. And I think that probably goes back to an evolutionary perspective when it's not that long ago that we were hunter-gatherers living in tribes. And if you were outcast from that tribe, it meant certain death. We romanticize the lone wolf and all that, but actually the lone wolf dies. So I think that's deeply ingrained in our psyche as human beings, that fear of rejection and wanting to stay conformist and staying in a safe position. So we have to actually look at that, though, with our prefrontal cortex, which we have now, which can allow us to say, is this belief keeping me stuck? Is it actually helping me, or is it keeping me stuck now? Once we identify what that belief or that fear is, then we can work on it. We can rationalize it. and we can go, hey, I don't need that anymore. I can move forward without it. Because all the time in life where we get stuck, there'll be a reason for it. It can always sometimes be hard to get to that. It can be uncomfortable work to get to that, but it's always worthwhile work because once we recognize it, we can change it and then we can move forward.
No, wonderful. Let me ask you this. With entrepreneurs, you mentioned self-sabotage. We briefly talked about things what would be considered as imposter syndrome. Sometimes, depending on the background that you're on, that you come from, entrepreneurs have trouble accepting that they deserve making money. And I talk to a lot of people, I work with a lot of people, and because of the financial upbringing they had, they are only used to living with a certain amount of money. And they're working hard and they're doing well, and the business reaches the amount of money that they're used to making. And then all of a sudden, whether it be self-sabotage or whatever it is, they pump the brakes knowingly or unknowingly, right? Yeah. So for somebody who knows this, that this is the belief that I have, and who's trying to overcome this, what are some steps would you lay out for them?
There's two things. So I think the first one is to look back at your experience in childhood, maybe from your parents. What were the conversations that you witnessed that were about money, about finances? Was it happy? Was it like there's always enough for everything, no matter, or was it, oh, money's hard to come by, you've got to work hard? Did your parents argue about money? Because as children, we try and make sense of the world from what we observe. So if you saw your parents arguing about money, your belief may become money is bad. It causes problems, right? It's actually lack of money. So first thing is like understand, look back and see if you can understand where your beliefs around it come from, and then re-engineer them. Because the thing is, when you actually go back and you try and look through your adult eyes of the situation, you'll see that you were just observing a behavior. It wasn't actually a truth. This is the very thing. We take our beliefs as truth, but they're not. So we can go back and go, actually, I was observing a behavior, a moment in time. It wasn't an absolute truth. Therefore, I don't need to have that belief around it. With money in particular, there's something really interesting to do called the money thermometer. Right? So I use this with clients. So it's what's an amount of money you think you could easily earn in a month? And you go, oh, $10,000. Oh, great. Let's turn it up. 20,000. And you keep going till the person's, there's no way, whatever that ceiling is. Say you get to $200,000 and my person's like, that's your money thermometer. So you're like, okay, that's your belief. That's your thing. Your subconscious believes you can make between 10 to 200, but you can't go beyond that. Just practice visualizing making more than that. Because the main thing is we can train our brains for a different reality. So you spend time feeling more comfortable visualizing earning that larger amount. And over time, your brain will come to accept, your mind will come to accept that's something that is possible for you. So I'd say that look at your childhood experiences, where those beliefs might have come from, and then do that money thermometer exercise, and then practice just turning the heat up.
No, that's great. So in a way, what you're saying is the existing money beliefs have come into our life because of the fact that we're conditioned to it due to our upbringing and how the conversations were had. And by utilizing this money thermometer exercise, you're conditioning your mind to making it feel like it is normal to go above that threshold that you thought was previously not possible.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that.
Love it. Love it. So when you are working with your clients who are in this midlife crisis, whether it be they're stuck at a threshold of fitness, personal happiness, finances, we all have a tendency to want more, right? But more is not always better. Have you all come across clients who you have thought seemingly have everything, but they are lacking that perspective? Or is it always trying to find a way for them to get more?
It varies from client to client, but for sure you'll come across people who seem like they have everything or think they have everything. But an exercise we can do is actually look at the wheel of life, I call it. It's like, where's your energy being expended? And if you imagine the quadrants of like career, finances, self-development, family/relationships, health, and you get them to rate on how much energy you're putting there now. Ideally, where would you like it to be? And I guess in the ideal world, we'd all want a more balanced wheel. But often you'll find people who are, let's use the traditional idea of success, that they've got a lot of things. All their energy has been career, finance, maybe health as well. But then there's no energy going into relationships, family, and they've got like an unhappy relationship at home because we've only got a finite amount of energy. And it's fine to channel it to one thing if that is your ultimate goal. If your relationship's important to you, but all your energy is being channeled into your career, are you ultimately going to be happy? Because we've got to get that balance right. So I think encouraging clients to look at the overall picture of where they want their energy directed in an ideal world is a really powerful tool for them to see, oh, wow, I thought maybe I did want more. Actually, I had a client and he is running a hedge fund and he's, yeah, my wife and my child live out in the country. I am based in the city and I leave on a Sunday night. So I'm in the office really early on a Monday morning. And then I'll get back to them like at 1 in the morning and they sneak in. So basically, I spend Saturday with my child, then I go back and I'm just, wow. And are you happy? And he was like, no. That's just an example of misdirected energy.
So what do you tell somebody like that? Because he's a hedge fund manager, he's
Mm.
making money, he's worked hard all his life, his job is in a place that is not where he lives. What must he sacrifice, or what are some adjustments that he can make because his job may not allow him to?
Yeah, so I encourage clients like that to start thinking about what the plan is, right? Because often we'll just end up in these situations. Life takes us there, and it's this is how I'm living it, and it can be a very tunnel vision without actually thinking, okay, this is how I'm living right now, but how do I want it to look down the line? Then you can start to make a 6 month, a 1 year, a 5 year plan about, okay, how could I change those conditions? Am I going to stay with this hedge fund? Could I do something else with a different hedge fund? Could I be a consultant if it gets me more time? But make that plan, because once you start making a plan, your vision will go wider and you'll start seeing options that you didn't see before.
Yeah, almost always we are so focused on the specific problem there is, we don't take the time to stop and think, look left and right to understand what are the other options that are available. We just accept
Yeah.
status quo. And that's just for in every area of life, right?
Yeah, a really good exercise people can do actually if they're listening is if you are thinking about a change in your life or you're just not happy with like how it's panning out at the moment, we often overlook what I call our mountain of value, right? Which is all of our experiences, our qualifications and stuff that we have. So just grab a bit of paper and write down all that stuff. And you'll be really surprised, I think, when you sit there because we end up, our system channels us. You go to school, whatever subjects you're good at, you then specialize in to get good grades. Then you go to university. So your perspective is just narrowing all the time. By the time you're far into your career, it could be like, I can't do anything else. But actually, that's not really true. You have a load of experience from across life, probably a load of qualifications, other things. You can change direction. It might not be easy, but you can do it. So sit down and look at that mountain of value that you're sat on top of. And it's like when you're sat on top of the mountain, you can't really see it, right? So if you're observing it from far away, you can see everything there. So do it. Look at what you have, all your
Yeah.
assets.
Yeah, almost just getting a list of all the things that you have done, list of all the things that you're capable of doing without judging yourself. Because so many of us almost always start with a judgment, thinking that nobody's going to want this or nobody really cares about that. But I guess you are teaching them to just take the judgment out and just first list things out, get that brain dump, and then we'll worry about what is workable and what is not.
Exactly that.
You shared a couple of really good tools and exercises that you work with clients on, especially the quadrant example. I loved it. To be able to first map out where am I and where do I want to be. For those who are listening to this and they are wanting to know what it is like to work with James, what are some other beginning exercises that they could do on their own to get a little bit of an understanding of what they truly want out of their life? Because one of the things that I hear often almost is that I am not happy. Okay, we'll make you happy. I'm not really sure. Or
Yeah.
they list out 17 things that they're
Yeah.
unhappy about every aspect in life, right? So if we just take these two groups of people and they wanted to work with you, right? What are some beginning exercises they would do other than the 4 quadrant exercises that could get them a little bit of a glimpse and a sprinkle of experiencing you?
Yeah, the first thing to do is explore with someone. Do they actually know what they want to do? Some people do, right? Some people have a very clear vision, and that's the easy example. But so many people do feel lost or uncertain. So I say, okay, let's start with what are your values? And that stumps a lot of people. So they're like, oh, no, I hadn't really thought about that. Have a think about your values. What are they? Are they being affluent? Is it freedom? Is it doing charity? Write down 10. And then what you want to do is reduce that list. So what I normally get clients to do is come up with a list of 10 values. Then let's really get it down. So you're left with the top 3. And that will give you a really clear picture of the kind of areas you could be operating in by your values. Because here's the thing, we know from psychology, if we're not living by our values, we're going to be unhappy. Something's going to give at some point or other. So that's one thing. There's an exercise I do that's Japanese called Ikigai, which is about finding your purpose. So you want to look for what do I love doing? What does the world need? What are my values? And where do they overlap? So the other thing we'll look at is what are your passions? What do you love doing? And don't worry about whether you think you can make money from it or not. Someone might say, oh, I love making model train sets, but I can never make money from that. Is that true or not? Or are there people that make money from making model train sets? What if you could have a business doing that made you money and made you happy? Crazy example. But we often discount these things, right? So it's looking at your values, looking at your passion, and then looking at your purpose. And then you can start to play with all those elements to say, okay, can we see how this would fit into something that you could do that would also tick the box of allowing you to make a living, bringing money in, all the rest of it. So yeah, those exercises, I start with values and passion. And if you don't know what your passion is, because this is a big thing for a lot of people in later in life, they're like, I don't really know anymore. But what did you enjoy doing as a child? Because we can look back to our childhood for clues. Like what made you really smile and laugh when you were a child? What did you love doing? Or what have you always really wanted to do, but you never did? And again, this is where we have to be careful that we don't let our ego stop us. Someone might be like, oh, I always wanted to learn to tap dance, but I just feel stupid doing it. And you know what? You're a beginner at something. You're a beginner at something. Don't worry about it. What's better to have tried to tap dance and, done it, giving it a go, or got to the end of your life going, oh, I wish I had tried tap dancing, but I never did.
Having worked with so many people in so many disciplines, accomplished people, struggling people, do you think fulfillment or the lack of it is just mostly because they are restricting themselves from being who they truly want to be or doing the things that they truly want to do?
I think there's a combination of factors. I think the way our society and culture is structured leads a lot of people down avenues that they really wouldn't want to go down if they really thought about it. And I think a big thing now that we're seeing is a lack of community connection and a lack of what I'll term spirituality. So again, not necessarily about religion, but if we go back not so many years, there would be in all societies a central kind of community thing where people would get together and they would be together and they would support each other. And that's disappeared from our world. And that can leave people like missing stuff. We have three needs: to be seen, to be heard, and to matter. And a lot of that people feel overlooked in one or more of those. And I think having that lack of spiritual connection, people don't even realize that having that hole is affecting them that badly. So it's about the things we've talked about already, but really thinking, what's the legacy I want to leave? How can I connect more with my fellow human beings? How can I be part of the community? Do I want to even connect to something either inside myself or that's greater than myself? And that might be God or religion for some people. It might look like something else for someone else. But I think what I observe is when people can connect back into that space and get into community again, that really helps them start to feel more fulfilled.
To be seen, to be heard, to matter. I've never actually heard that put that way. I'm going to remember that one. I'll try it to you when I quote it next time because it's really good. Because that's exactly what it is. Whether you're in an unfulfilling relationship or a job or wherever you are, those are the three factors. So tell us a little bit about your program. Obviously, there's so much value that you're bringing in and people coming from all walks of life with different type of crisis, right? What are the different types of programs you have? We talked about the lack of community aspect of it, the spirituality aspect of it. How are these integrated in the different programs you have to help the people who want to work with you?
Yeah, sure. So the Midlife Reset is our flagship program. That's an 8-week program. We deliver it all in our app. So it's actually like having us as coaches in your pocket. Everything's there. Everything's scheduled for you. And again, it's around evidence-backed ways to move for midlife, nutrition coaching, the mindset coaching. And then that's all supported. Community is important. We have a private Facebook group, and then we do a group coaching call every week with that as well, which is really nice. We keep the numbers small on every intake, so it stays intimate. Other than that, we do one-to-one coaching as well. So that's whatever someone wants to work on. And then there's the corporate work we do, which we find really fulfilling as well. Now, that obviously will depend on the corporate client, what they want to look at. But that enables you to reach a lot of people and make a difference to a lot of lives. Yeah, that's something we love as well.
When it comes to the app, tell us a little bit more about that. Is it a membership app? Is there new content that comes out? How does one continue to learn from it?
Yeah, when you join the program, you'll basically get the app and the program flows through that app for 8 weeks. So it builds over time. We've got progressive exercise, nutrition coaching starts really simple, builds up over time. And the same with the mindset coaching. It's what's the main goal you want to get? Why do you want it? And then we'll look at these things like beliefs, habits, where you're tripping yourself up. That's all supported by the group coaching calls as well. So we're like, bring your issues, let's hot seat coach on those calls. So that runs for 8 weeks. But once you get to the end of that, then you've got the option to continue with a membership where we continue giving you new programs. You continue with the group coaching, and loads of people go for that. And we actually just recently launched like a 6-month version of our program. So recognize some people like, yeah, 8 weeks is great. They get the results, but they want to carry on. So we're like, okay, let's actually do a 6-month package where we carry on with these deep dives. We do actual like face-to-face meetup as well. We gather everyone together for an actual event in London. So yeah, nice. Lots of ways to touch point with people and support them.
Yeah, especially a longer program like that 6 months long, it also not only builds on that community aspect of things that you're talking about, but also accountability, right? Because I
Yeah.
can totally see somebody being on track with the nutrition for 8 weeks. And then after that, the moment that the program ends, you're back to the donuts.
I like to be coach them better than that, but yeah, no, I take your point, and it is powerful because I think you'll know this. When you're feeling responsible to someone or something else, your results are going to be a lot better. So even just having, yeah, you're prompted through the apps, reminders, have you done this? Have you done that? What's your water intake today? But having that group coaching call every week where you're not only talking about what's going on for you, but you're seeing everyone else there and you've got to know those people. That's really powerful as well.
Let's talk about the corporate end of things because there's some clientele audience members that I have that are CEOs that are more interested in this. How does the corporate program work? Because the program that you described is midlife crisis. So is it presented that way? Because I don't know if a company is comfortable saying that you guys have a midlife crisis. I have an expert coming and help you with that. How does that work?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Over in the UK in particular, there's this thing going on with it. There's a bit of a brain drain. Like a lot of companies tending to get rid of people in their 50s, particularly post-COVID. But then they've actually realized that a lot of kind of unofficial knowledge is exiting the building with these people. So now I have an effort to understand them more and keep them in place. So some of the work we do is around that, but also around the menopause and for men, low testosterone. So we know like at this point in life from the 40s onwards, women and men can be affected by these hormonal changes. So it can vary from client to client. Sometimes we'll just go in and deliver a workshop where we'll talk about what could be going on for them and give them a chance to answer questions. But other times we've gone in and done like a whole series of workshops over week after week, and sometimes even created a specific program for the organization in an app. We'll have, here's nutrition coaching for you, here's some movement routines, here's some mindset modules you can take and run through, and the workforce can tap into that.
We didn't really get a chance to talk about the menopause, the low testosterone aspect of your coaching. Is it mostly nutrition based? How does it work?
So it's good. So a great question. So it's about helping people understand what's going on for them from a hormonal perspective and how that's affecting them physiologically and actually psychologically as well, which is a bit that's often overlooked. So I think for many women, they'll find when they hit perimenopause and then menopause, they get these physical symptoms. They get the hot flashes. They can get the foggy mind, but a big thing from the physical perspective, they'll start to put weight on. So with the estrogen changing, fat distribution changes in the female body, it will move more around onto the belly. It can be harder to lose it. Metabolism is dropping with a drop in estrogen and testosterone. So getting them to understand actually what's happening for them and then giving them a route to work with that, to optimize their hormone health around it, which is effectively by diet, what foods to avoid, what you should be, good eating habits, but also exercise, how you can exercise to improve your hormonal health. And then that plays into the psychological side, because what we see is a lot of people do what I call the external work, right? They'll do the diet, they'll do the workout, but they're not actually thinking about what's going on in their mind. So we need to start building in positive mindset practices as well. So we'll do a lot of work on that because, again, estrogen and testosterone affect our psychology. We can become more anxious, become more prone to depression. And we know that when we do go down that road, our brain actually rewires to actually reinforce that behavior. So we want to be aware of that and help head it off at the pass. And the same is true for men, right? Testosterone is their main sex hormone. You're losing muscle mass, you're putting them on more weight around the middle, the spare tire. Men can feel this loss of identity almost because they can be wrapped up in very much in their physical identity. If they're at work, they might then be struggling to focus. Their motivation might be flagging. And for both genders, libido can be a big thing as well, right? It can disappear. It can fluctuate. That leads to psychological pressures. So it's about helping people understand that, know that they're not alone with it, right? It's not because a lot of people, I think, before they hear about it, they're like, oh, I don't even want to talk about it because it's this crazy thing happening to my body and I don't really understand it. It just must be me. No, it's not just you. Everyone's experience is individual, but it's happening to lots of people in different ways. I think just opening the dialogue, getting people to understand and giving them the tools that they can help deal with it more effectively.
Wow. Just through your personality, the way you explain things, the way the programs are structured, the different ways it's offered, it's one thing is very clear, James, which is that you're an educator and you are bringing about change in people's life by first introducing them to good knowledge that helps them understand themselves first, and then providing them with the tactics and the tips and the tricks to be able to carry out the changes in their life that they want to have. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, because in a world where now we can pick up the phone and connect with somebody millions of miles away, in a world where seemingly closer to everybody because of technology, we have never been further apart. We have never been lonelier. And for those of us in our 40s, life just wasn't like this all the time. We grew up in a different society. So I think our generation is having the toughest time adjusting to this modern technological world where we are supposed to feel closer to technology, but we don't. And that's where you come in. That's where your program comes in. I cannot speak more highly of you as a person and the program that you've laid out. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I pause it now.